Let's talk about compassion. That's a nice word, isn't it? Nice people use words like compassion. But do they have any idea what they mean by that? I think we need to start with some definitions. First, from Wikipedia, compassion is a human emotion prompted by enduring pain with others. More vigorous than empathy, the feeling commonly gives rise to an active desire to alleviate another's suffering. Now we're getting some clarity. One more, from dictionary.com. Compassion, a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate the suffering. Let's break this down into components. First, compassion is a feeling. Second, it is a feeling for the misfortune of someone else. And finally, it leads to a sincere desire to help. Let's look at these in detail. Feelings. Is this all just touchy-feely stuff, or does it actually mean something? People can fake feelings. A lot of people do fake feelings. But the way you know that a feeling is real is if it leads to some action. We'll get to that later. What does it require to really feel for somebody? Well, you have to have empathy. You feel with him. And in order to have empathy, it helps to have some personal experience with the particular sort of pain he is feeling. It doesn't have to be exact, because no two people's pain are quite the same, but it has to be at least approximate. And if you haven't got that, then what can help is to have a great deal of imagination so that you can imagine yourself in his shoes. Not very many people have that imagination, so it's best, if you want to show compassion, if you've had some suffering or difficulty in your own life that you can draw back on. People that have had really easy lives, they're not very compassionate. They can be very nice, but that's not at all the same thing. So, before you can have feeling, you must have empathy. We've added a fourth item here. Empathy for misfortune. What counts as a misfortune? Are we talking about an incurable, life-threatening disease? A stubbed toe? A dysfunctional family? Not getting that pony you wanted for your 6th birthday? Everyone has some pain in his life in some trivial sense, but not everybody has pain that has knocked his entire life off course and caused him real misery. The only pain worth feeling compassion for is the kind of pain that really hurts. Finally, desire to help. This is really complex. First off, it has to be sincere. Both the Bible and I look askance at insincere compassion. Let me give you a quote from the book of James. Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, "Go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? Back in the 70s, they came up with a saying, "Have a nice day." I don't think that anybody who ever said to somebody else, "Have a nice day," really cared whether the other person had a nice day or not. It was just something they said. And saying to someone, "Be well, be warm and well fed, I feel for you," that's pretty much in the same vein. It's just not real unless you intend to try to do something about it. Let me give you some examples of insincere compassion. Something that is called compassion but isn't. Public welfare systems. I don't mean just government welfare. I also include most private charities in this. A bureaucracy is not a human being. A bureaucracy collectively can experience some human emotions, but not others. Bureaucracy can feel arrogance. In fact, it almost always is arrogant. And it can feel fear, the need to defend itself from political opponents. But a bureaucracy cannot feel empathy, and a bureaucracy cannot feel compassion. In fact, sometimes a bureaucracy set up to help people can be quite callous and cruel. There was a young man named Joel Durham here in this state. He was a disabled child. He had seizures. He needed help from medical professionals to keep him from dying in a seizure. His school district tried to force him into a program of their own that was not staffed by professionals and would not give him the help he needed. His parents had to fight in court to keep him out of that. Why did they want to do this to him? That's unanswerable. The sort of people that do this sort of thing, they are not inclined to explain their actions. They just do these things. Some other examples. There are occasions where the DCYF in a state has taken a child away from his mother, put him in the custody of the father who was a known child sexual abuser. There are cases, many cases, where children in foster care are forced to take 11 prescription pills, overdosed on drugs, solely for the purpose of keeping them docile and manageable. That is not compassion. That is simply callous. What about private charities? Suppose you write out a $50 check to send food to starving children in Africa. Does that make you a compassionate person? Well, it's a cheap way to buy off your conscience, but think it through. Do you know how much of that money goes to so-called administrative and fundraising costs? Maybe you should look into that before you write out that check. And do you know how much of that food gets stolen by the very corrupt governments that are creating the starvation in the first place? From what I gather, it's roughly 100%. Sending money to give aid to starving children in Africa doesn't actually feed any starving children in Africa. And if you're really compassionate, you'll care about the results. Which brings me to the final aspect of desire to help. It leads to action. But not just any action. Action that includes follow through. There are many insincere expressions of feeling, but there's no such thing as an insincere action. An action always means something, and if there's follow through, you know how much it means it. So, to summarize, compassion, the real thing, must include all of these things: feeling for the misfortune of others and a sincere desire to help. It requires empathy. It leads to action and follow through. If any of these things are missing, it's not really compassion. Compassion without these things is just a word. Mr. Toastmaster.